Okay, wow. Yeah, it's been going on for that long, huh? Sorry, I'm always beguiled whenever like someone in grade school says, "Yeah, it started in grade 10 and now I'm in grade 12." I'm like, "Whoa, that's true." Um, but anyway, okay, so that's great. And do you play any instruments?
Yeah, my main instrument is violin. I also
Okay,
play piano too.
fantastic, great.
And that's why you wrote a piano trio.
Yeah.
Piano trio.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I
Let's
had a
move to
chance.
Catherine. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
Jared.
sorry. Maybe we could do introductions before each participant goes, or would you rather we do them all now in one go?
Why don't we do all introductions now? Because I'll just I'll put a quick schedule in the chat for
Okay,
everyone to see, but people might have to eat or
I understand.
stretch their body. So why don't we get Catherine to introduce herself?
Okay, I'm originally from Winnipeg, and I'm a viola player, and I studied viola performance at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, and I've been composing for a couple of years now, and I'm also on the board of directors for Vancouver Pro Musica, which is an organization that Glenn is also involved in.
Right, cool, great. And Glenn?
Yes, yeah, I'm with Pro Musica as well with Catherine. Catherine's our treasurer. I'm the president of the board. I am a composer, late starting composer. I started when I was 45 or older after my PhD, which is in science. I'm a conservation biologist by training, career which I've loved very much. But I always have had a split personality. I debated when I was at Brittany's stage about whether to go into music or science. I went into science. But then music, the lack of it in my life, caught up to me. And I began composing, which I never did do until a much older person. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So I've studied with different teachers, Jocelyn Morlock and Rodney Sharman, Michael True, and here I am, growing and learning, and as I will be all my life. And I'm just thrilled to be here with all of you and with Jared.
Great. Well, I want to say before we get started, just a big thank you to Muse West for sponsoring this masterclass and mini residency sort of thing. And also a big thank you to all the composers who have chose to participate. To everybody watching out there, it's a really stressful thing for a composer at any stage to present their work publicly, even in a finished form, and even when performed by an ensemble. And so then it's very brave of these composers, I think, to be willing to present works that are in progress and works that haven't even been performed yet in some cases, but also be willing to, receive constructive feedback in a public forum. So I just want to thank all of you for your willingness to do that, and I hope that it's productive for you and educational. I also want to say that when I do master classes, I might say something about your completed piece, like change this or change that or do this differently. And what I don't actually mean that you have to change it and get it re-recorded and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I know just how much work can go into writing a piece and getting it recorded and performed and whatnot. And, sometimes you don't always want to go through that process. But if you don't want to change the piece or you don't feel like changing the piece, try and take it as a consideration for like a future piece that you write. I remember when I've had master classes myself as a student, I'd had teachers who've said, to finish pieces that have been performed and I had a recording of and I was really happy with, oh no, you have to change that, and change that, and change that. And I always felt like, oh, but like I can't, because I can't get an orchestra to play this piece again because that's really expensive and I can't afford that because I'm a student. Or for that fact, I wouldn't be able to afford it now either. But anyway, my point is that just take any sort of constructive criticism with a grain of salt and try and think about how you might apply it either to the piece I'm talking about or to a future composition. So with that, why don't we get started, Jennifer?
Yeah, and I just want to say a quick thank you to my very dear friend Jared, who I have now known for 11 years.
Wow, yeah, a long time.
And who consistently provides me with honest feedback about, I'm actually a grade 5 teacher, so this whole arts administrative thing is it's not so much of a side gig anymore. It's pretty involved. But Jared has been an honest and kind friend who has guided me through so many steps of this process of commissioning and sort of organizing musical activities and educational activities. And I just trust him to give me great feedback all the time. And we always have a wonderful time when I visit my friends in New York. And hopefully that will be very soon. And I just want to thank Jared for trusting us with the creation of his new string quartet, which is called Phoenix. And the world premiere of that is in 8 days. And it's going to be on YouTube. And I will send you all the link to participate in that world premiere. It is a stunning piece. And I'm just really grateful to have worked with Jared on our very first commission. And it won't be the last. So, Brittany, it's all yours now.
So we
Glenn,
haven't
go
heard.
ahead.
We haven't heard from Minghui introduction.
Yes, Minghui.
Hi, I'm Minhui. I'm from China, and I'm now a compositional graduate student in Brandon University. And before that, I played the piano. So, but I fall in love with composition because I'm really enjoying the composition process. So, although today is I'm an audience, but I think this is my chance to listen guys composition, wonderful compositions, music. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it for sure. So why don't we get started? I'm just seeing how I could possibly make this work. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm trying to think if I should just automatically share on my iPad and scroll.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. I'll do
And
that.
I made you co-host so you can share
Great.
to your heart's content.
Thank you. So, all right, we've got a piano trio here. And I'm going to share computer sound. Oh, hold on a second. Stop share, because I need to specify that I want my iPad to be shared. Okay. Okay, so we've got, everyone can see the piano trio. Great. So I'm going to queue up the audio on this. And while I'm doing that, maybe Brittany, you could tell us a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, so I've been writing this on and off for about maybe 5 months now. And unfortunately, I haven't made that much progress. The whole point of this was to write something for my university application.
Okay. So piano trio, that's a challenging medium to write for. What sort of led you to write for a piano trio? It's a really fantastic medium, but I actually wrote one last year and it was an extremely challenging project. So I'm curious what sort of made you choose that instrumentation in the first place?
It's just simply because I have friends who are in a piano trio and they said that they'd be able to record it for me.
Well, that's great. And it's also, a great sort of opportunity to be able to test out things with your friends while you're in the compositional process. So, if something is challenging you or something like that, you can sort of hear how it sounds in real life and bounce ideas off of your friends and really sort of workshop it. So that's a really good, smart reason to write something. And have you had an opportunity to listen to many piano trios As yeah, do you have any favorites that have stuck out for you?
A few classical ones like Saint-Saëns.
Okay.
I also really like Tchaikovsky's.
Okay.
I've also heard recently a concert where they premiered 4 new piano trios
Oh, great.
at McGill University.
Oh, cool. Was it last or 2 Sundays ago?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, I was on that concert.
Oh,
Yeah.
With your trio, that was part of it. Oh,
It was great.
So yeah, you heard that piece then. And yeah, that was that was a really diverse program with a lot of different trios amongst the 5 of us. So cool. Thank you for tuning in. So Brittany, if I just press play on the recording that you sent in and just sort of scroll through it, will that sort of give us an idea of what you want to work on? Or do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're going to see in these sketches?
we can go through the recording.
Yep. Okay, cool. So I'm going to press play on this. Let me know if there's any problems with audio or anything like that, and I can always stop and restart and whatever, and we'll make it work. Okay. So pressing play. Okay, great. A lot of really great, strong ideas here, Brittany. And I particularly like a couple of things. One thing I really like is how you have a very conversational aspect amongst every player in the trio. It's true chamber music, which, you know, is a conversation. And then I also really like how some of the gestures and motives that you introduce at the beginning of the piece resurface in a lot of different forms later in the piece. When I sort of just glanced at this prior to this, I didn't immediately see that, but hearing it now, I think you did that very successfully. So, you know, bravo on that one. I guess I have a couple of questions for you. How do you generally go about composing? Do you work by hand? Do you work at your instrument? Do you work at a piano? Do you work at the computer? What's sort of your process like?
Yeah, I usually switch between using Sibelius and just regular manuscript paper. And
Okay.
I don't always use the piano sometimes, but normally I don't use the piano. I just
Okay. Why not? Just out of curiosity.
I feel like if I use the piano, I rely too much on my hands to compose and not my head. And sometimes I do, but I prefer not to.
Interesting. Okay. Do you ever compose with your voice?
Yes, sometimes.
Okay. And how does that work? Do you record it while you're sort of singing it or vocalizing it?
Yeah, I usually just record on voice memos on my phone.
Okay, good, good. I'm glad that you do that. Do you ever use something like a computer program like Logic or Pro
No.
Tools? That can be another productive thing to do where you can sort of improvise chamber music one sort of layer at a time, where you record into Logic, usually via MIDI keyboard or something like that. But you can even use your computer microphone and something like that. And that can be a really useful way to just try out different techniques and textures and sort of combine them with each other without sort of being beholden to the interface that Sibelius has, where you have to write in a certain time signature, and you can't really improvise. So that's something else which you could try, which I think would be interesting for you. I'm wondering if you could maybe describe how you see the structure of what I just listened to.
I don't actually have a structure in mind.
Okay.
I've just written whatever comes to me.
Okay, cool, cool. I'm wondering, do you think about the overall structure and shape and narrative of what you're creating in general, or is this, I mean, the fact you haven't thought about that is okay, totally fine. These are sketches of an unfinished piece, but typically, do you think about those sorts of things?
Yeah, sometimes I have like an overall shape that I
Okay.
have in mind, but
Okay.
not specific, like ABA or something like that.
Right, right. So an overall shape is good. I think what would be productive for you, because you mentioned you're having trouble sort of moving forward with this, correct?
Yeah.
I think what would be productive is taking a step back and trying to find some way to qualify the structure and overall shape and narrative that you currently have in this piece. And then sort of assess that and think, okay, where do I want this piece to go? What do I want this piece to do? And sort of go from there in terms of figuring out what to do next. So like, for instance, if I was to sort of assess what you've done shape-wise, you kind of have this introduction for the first however long it is, where you have these held harmonics and these sort of little motivic cells that eventually become something more substantial. And then when we get to rehearsal mark A here, we're sort of off to the races, and we start off with our sort of main idea. And you take a lot of the ideas you introduced in your first section, and you develop them in various ways. And then that sort of leads us to this second section in B minor. And then I guess that's where you're getting a little stuck right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe you could describe the relationship between what's in the B minor section and what you have presented before that.
Yeah, so the runs in the violin are sort of resembling the glisses in the piano I have in the beginning. So I have the pianist using the strings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the shape.
And sorry, just to interrupt, are those glisses, are those chromatic glisses perpendicular to the strings? Or are they, okay,
inside the piano. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so that's sort of an imitation of that shape. And what else, just out of curiosity?
Some of the pizzas are not the same, but similar.
Okay.
In the cello. And yeah,
okay,
that's pretty much it for that section.
So in terms of moving forward with this kind of section here, I guess a big decision you'll probably want to make for yourself is whether the music is going to return to sort of the satirical character and those satirical ideas that you initially introduce at rehearsal mark A, or if this is going to continue in this sort of sound world and develop into something else, or remain here and end here. I think those are sort of, just laying it out very basically, your three options. You can go back to the world that you already created, develop into something new, or remain here and end the piece here. So I'm wondering, and this is going to seem like just a strange question, but have you sat down in silence or taken a walk in silence and tried to sort of hear your way through this from, this point forward?
You mean like imagine what it could be?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Have you?
Sometimes, yeah. I just sit there and just wonder what it could sound like.
Okay. So that's one approach that you can take and see if that sort of gets you somewhere. And, if you're sort of wanting to go back to the material that you developed in the first section, what you'll probably want to be asking yourself is, how can I take gestures from rehearsal mark C and beyond and relate them as clearly as possible to material that was already presented? Or take material that was already presented before, and when you bring it back, adjust it in such a way so that it relates very clearly to the material that you have here. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one sort of approach you can do if you plan on going back to some material. Another thing which you can sort of do, which I think might help you move forward with this, and which always helps me, and I'm always reluctant to do it because it always seems like it's going to be so much work, but it never is actually as much work as I think it's going to be, is actually going back through what you've already written, maybe even in this first section, and seeing if everything that you've written is supposed to occur the way that it occurs. Because sometimes what you'll find is you've been used to having it one way for such a long time that you're just used to that. And so the music goes in the direction that you've taken it, which is great. But sometimes you might sort of reconsider it and rethink about it and look at it again and think, what if this section went in this other direction than the direction that I've currently gone in? And so trying to imagine if if sections before where you've stopped could possibly progress in a different direction, that might actually get you on the right track to finishing this piece if you want to. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
And so like part of that, which is challenging, is you have all of this fantastic material that you've written from the beginning up until, where the music stops. And like, the real sort of, for me anyways, whenever I have misgivings about this kind of process, it's always like, what if I have to give up that amazing idea I came up with what if I can't incorporate it into this piece? And, you know, it's always sort of tough to sort of have to do away with some of those ideas in, you know, in service of creating a form that works and getting from the beginning to the end. But you can always use those ideas in another piece as well, right? So just keep that in mind too. Oh, let's see. In terms of, I'm just looking here. So I'm just going to point this out as a kind of general comment. Not a general comment. I mean, I'm going to refer specifically to this violin line that you've created.
Mhm.
See, when you said that the shape of that is similar to the glissando at the beginning, I could totally understand how, now that you've said that, that is the case. But I wonder if you could actually do more, you know, if the sort of contour of this line here is a big motivic element in this piece. I wonder if you could sort of take that contour and do more with it in other ways besides just a glissando at the bottom end of the strings of the piano, leading into that new section. So that when we hear that violin line moving super fast and being similar to this shape, we really, as audience members, don't even have to think about it. We can hear sort of a connection between that motive and the fast moving violin line. Does that sort of make sense? What you might want to do is look at a composer. Do you know the composer Alfred Schnitko?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which pieces do you know of his, just out of curiosity?
I think one of his violin pieces.
Okay. Stille Nacht, Silent Night.
I think I'm not
Yeah.
sure the name, but probably.
It's like the satirical version of Silent Night with wrong notes and stuff. Anyway, Schnitko was known as being a polystylistic composer. He would incorporate all of these different musical styles within the same composition. And he started to do this in the early 1970s. And by the mid and late 1970s and early 80s, this style really kind of matured, where he was able to sort of seamlessly transition from one style to another in a way that was almost neoclassical, very smoothly. And it might be worthwhile to listen to something like his Concerto Grosso #1, for instance, or his String Quartet #3, or his Concerto for Piano and Strings, and look at how he moves between styles. Because I think what you'll notice is, even though he's working within vastly different styles and aesthetics in these pieces, there's a lot of motivic coherence between the music from one style and music from another style, and B, he does it in such a way where it doesn't feel arbitrary or sudden when he's moving from one style to another. You can really hear how one thing transforms into another, or the connection between different musical ideas. So like, you know, if sometimes I like to think, I mean, not just harmonically, but in terms of timbre and color as well. If I see something like this, and then I see this violin line that you composed right here, I'll sort of think of them as being on like two opposite poles in terms of what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the glissando as being this very sort of dark, murky, chromatic, almost unpitched sort of sound world. That's, you know, a very sort of lugubrious color in the low range of the piano, okay? And then I sort of compare it to this, and okay, it's the same material, but it's very sprightly, it's in B minor, it's tonal, it's in a high register of the violin, it's consored, so rather than a grungy low strings, it's this very kind of muted, almost effervescent effect, right? And so what I would think to myself is, okay, if this is going to be a significant motive in my piece, these are the two sort of extremes, or maybe they're not. Maybe you could make them even more extreme in different directions. But where are the midpoints? Where can this idea surface where it's not quite, it's not this low grungy effect that we initially hear it as, or it's not this high sort of effervescent effect in the violin either. Where is it sort of, where are the midpoints where we can hear it develop and transform? That's something that I think you could think about as you sort of compose this piece. And, you know, in other situations as well, although I bring up this example because it's probably the most extreme example that you have of a theme that you're, or an idea that you're transforming. So that's something that I think you could think about while you're doing this. Here's another question. Okay, how do you think about range and register when you're composing?
Like, what do you mean?
Well, so there's sort of two ways of thinking about this. There's sort of the overall range that you're using amongst three instruments, all three instruments, and how you're introducing different ranges and registers. And then there's also sort of the unique range and register of each instrument and their individual properties. My point is, or what I'm trying to get at here is, I think you could use range and register to a greater extent to create more drama in your music by holding off on certain ranges for a while and then introducing them suddenly or introducing them gradually or something like that. Because the more you hold off from something, the more that it creates an expectation that we as listeners want to hear it, right? So just as an example, if I look here at your opening, you know, it's really kind of exciting how you begin with this harmonic, very sort of esoteric and very strange and mysterious almost. We don't know what that harmonic's going to do or how it's going to be. And it's limited to a very high register. What I wonder is, what if you actually took all of these gestures and maybe didn't keep them all way up in the stratosphere like this harmonic is, but what if they were all, let's say, above the C, below middle C? So this, for instance, where's my pencil? This, for instance, was maybe an octave higher. This was an octave higher. You know, this was an octave higher. And basically saving the low range of the piano and cello for when this comes in. Then when we hear this for the first time, it's already dramatic and creepy and scary. I hope that's what you were going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, okay, good. Sorry, I just, you know, I don't want to impose my own impressions on the music. But you know, it already sounds dramatic and creepy and scary. But then if we hear that after not having heard any low sonorities, and then suddenly there's this, you know, big scary roar at the bottom of the piano, that could be really dramatic and really impactful. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So like, I think that's just one example of how you could play around with range and register. And so like, to that end, I love how you're using the low piano here to create that sort of ambient effect, and the inside of the piano for that matter. But I also think you could use other extremities of the piano range-wise in the more conventionally notated sections as well. So, I mean, even right here, this could be way up high in the highest range of the piano if you want to. Or you could have one hand very high and one hand very low. But my point is, a lot of your piano writing is on the staff or very close to the staff. And I think that if you played around with different ranges of the piano and extreme ranges of the piano, you could create more drama and even more excitement in this music. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot. Do you have any questions for me so far?
No.
No. So here's another question, or maybe more of a thought. Let's call it a thought. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this masterclass, I think that you have a really great sense of conversation between the different parts of the piano, sorry, of the three instruments. And I actually think you could use range to enhance this conversational aspect, where it's not only just a conversation between two instruments in two ranges, but you could actually make it sound like a conversation between many different voices in many different ranges. If, for instance, you took some of these motives and, you know, had one in one octave, and then the next time it comes up, put it in another octave or something like that, or give it a different playing technique. And so you could create this more sort of not coloristic world, but this conversational world could be even more sort of rich and deep in terms of how you approach it. I also think what could be an interesting thing for you to consider, which you don't do a lot of, and which you could maybe try to do more of, and see if it's something that works for you and works for your piece, is try and find ways in which you can combine all three instruments, and try to strike a balance between conversational music, where you have one instrument conversing with another, but also passages where you have all three instruments creating a type of effect. So like, for instance, I mean, this opening with the, you know, the piano bliss here, I wonder if there's a way you could write that effect again, where you have all three instruments doing some kind of glissando-like gesture, or all three instruments just imitating this shape somehow. Like, I think that could be an interesting thing for you to play around with here, and sort of finding a juxtaposition between conversational writing and then more sort of, I use the term orchestral, not necessarily because it's an orchestra, but more because an orchestra is sort of one organism where a bunch of different voices come together to create an overall effect, and isn't always necessarily as conversational. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
Can I ask, what's actually this technique right here?
Yeah.
What is that?
So on the violin, you can just play with your left hand and, you know, pretty heavily. And
that's, is that the strings on which you want those to be played?
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay, I see. I wasn't sure if that was like a trill or something that you didn't notate, but that makes sense. I've never seen it notated that way.
So like the G string, once you lift it up, it should be able to actually hear the G string.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so like,
yeah,
you're coming up with some really interesting effects and techniques in this piece, actually, that are kind of unconventional, and I think that's really great. I wonder, you know, I know that you're working on this for, you know, college applications, university applications and stuff, and you know, that deadline's coming up pretty soon, so you probably want to finish it. But I wonder, right now you're sort of taking the large scale approach to what you're writing, right? Where you have this piece that's sort of developing, and it's a long piece, in a sense. I mean, it's not like, it's not that long, but it's not, there's many different ideas that you're incorporating into this one movement. And another possible approach, if you're stuck right now with this longer form, could be creating actually miniatures that are based on some of these techniques that you're working on, where you sort of explore and dig into some of these techniques and motives in a little more of a focused way. So like, for instance, I'm using this example a lot because it sticks out in a good way in this piece, but it's also kind of dissimilar to a lot of other elements in the piece. You could write a whole movement for piano trio that's like a minute long that only focuses on glissandos and how this particular shape and glissando shape changes and shifts amongst the instruments. You could potentially, oh, what did I just do? I clicked on something I didn't mean to. There we go. You could write a piece that's based on the sound that you get when you take your finger off the string and you get the open string, and that sort of effect. That's a really interesting technique that I haven't seen a whole lot of. It's a subtle technique and it's very inventive. So like that's another possible approach that you could take here, rather than making it this whole sort of grandiose form or structure, if you're stuck. So yeah, it just, it depends what sort of comes naturally to you and what how you might work. Have you ever gotten together with your friends who are in the piano trio and just kind of, if you wanted to do the glissando movement, for instance, you could say, okay, here's our shape. You could draw a shape like, like the one that you have, and be like, I want you to improvise glissandos and other sort of gestures on that shape. And just, take your phone and record a voice memo of it and see if anything cool comes of that. There's many different ways you can create that shape on the piano, including inside the piano as you do, but you could also create it on the keys with your fingers. You could create it inside the piano in the upper register. You could apply that same shape to many different types of harmonic languages. So it doesn't just have to be a chromatic scale, but it could be a major scale, it could be an octatonic scale, it could be any combination of scales. And then, on the string instruments, there's also sort of a huge world of possibilities there. It could be a regular glissando that follows that shape. You could also have a harmonic glissando. You know what a harmonic glissando is?
Yeah, just harmonic and then
yeah. So like, imagine, starting on a violin with this shape with just a regular glissando, and then gradually lightening your finger pressure and having it transform into a harmonic glissando. That's sort of that's a way to take this idea and really sort of run with it in an interesting way. There's a piece by an American composer, Sky McClay, called Many, Many Cadences. Have you ever heard that piece?
No, I haven't.
It's a brilliant, brilliant piece of music. It's just, it begins with a string quartet playing all of these different kind of mixed up cadences that don't really relate to each other. Sorry, Jennifer?
We have about a minute and a half till our first break.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that would be an example, Brittany, of a piece that really sort of runs with one idea and really transforms that one idea in a lot of different ways. It's about 8 minutes long, so it's not a miniature exactly. But something like that could be really interesting for you to listen to, I think. So, check that piece out. I can write it in the chat if you're interested in seeing that piece. And the reason I bring that up as well is because at the end of the piece, she uses the technique that I'm describing, where she has microtonal glissandos that eventually kind of turn into these harmonic glissandos. And it's a really kind of cool and special effect, I think. So Brittany, we're pretty much out of time. I hope this was helpful to you. Do you have any final questions for me or things you want to ask? Or
no.
Do you have hopefully ways to move forward on this, or at least approaches to move forward on this?
Approaches? I'm just trying to write as much as possible and try and cram everything, get everything done.
Oh yeah, we've all been there. But try some of the things that I've suggested if you haven't already, and see if they help you out. It could be very helpful to just switch up that approach a little bit from cramming and trying. I know it's like you're on a deadline, so of course cramming is the nature of that. But I think that if you took just a step back for a couple of days and tried to recalibrate a bit, I think that you've got a lot of really good potential in this piece. And I think that it's going to be very strong once it's finished. So congratulations. Nice work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we all clap for Brittany? Fantastic. And Brittany, I heard, like Jared said, a lot of potential in this piece. It's already really great. And I definitely hear your direction toward film score. It just, I'm not a composer, so I don't know more to say about that other than like I really felt that I could hear elements of that for sure. So everybody, we're taking 10-minute breaks. You can see the schedule. Lovely work, Brittany. Thanks for the encouraging comment. Composers are so much nicer than pianists. Wait, I said that online. That's okay. I don't take it back. So I encourage everybody to do what they need to do. Restroom, food. This coffee break was sponsored by Storm City Coffee. Recharge, and we'll see everybody back at 11 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. in New York. So we'll see everybody in 10 minutes.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. Great job, Brittany.
Hi, everybody. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. So, Glenn, did you drive from Winnipeg?
Yes, yeah, we did. My wife and I took it slowly. So
Nice.
it was basically a week-long drive with a 2-day break in Saskatchewan, and it was absolutely gorgeous. It was so beautiful. It's a perfect time. We had good weather, and the country is just really beautiful right now. Harvest is mostly over. Trees are colored everywhere, and we took secondary roads, so there wasn't really that much traffic, and so it was a really
Lovely.
Yeah. It's a way to fall in love with your country.
It is. You went through my beautiful home province of Alberta.
Yeah, we went through from Oyen, Alberta, through to Rocky Mountain House, and then in
Wow.
Saskatchewan Landing. Yeah.
I haven't heard the words Oyen or Rocky Mountain House in a long time. I know exactly where those are too, because I'm from Red Deer.
Oh, you are. We drove around Red Deer to stay away from COVID, of which Alberta is having trouble with.
Oh, you don't want to go through Red Deer right now.
No. We went around by Sylvan Lake, so.
Okay, that's where I spent most of my summer evenings in high school.
It's very beautiful. I can see why you did.
Wonderful. So Glenn, I have a question before we get started. How has your work as a biologist, someone who appreciates nature and animals, how has that influenced your composition?
It has. It's actually one of the reasons I think that I came back to music was, as I said, I studied science. I was involved, mainly been involved as a consultant. But when I finished my PhD, I kind of had this feeling of soul death. If it's the only word I can come up with. A depression about what to do going forward. I did my PhD when I was older, and I realized I'd left music behind 25 years ago, and so just the logical, I really like science very much. Its approach to understanding the world, when it's done with that curiosity, but there was a piece about the heart that wasn't in there. And so I started singing, going to concerts, and then one day, "Why don't you compose?" popped into my mind, and I said, "What is that?" I never thought about that, and especially at the age of between 45 and 50, that seems crazy. But the idea stuck, and so here I am. To answer your question more directly, it does inform it. Although I can't say really how, although maybe the piece Caribou Crossing is one of the pieces we're going to do, is maybe the closest thing I've written to, or tried to write, which is an expression of how I feel about the work I've done, which has been conservation biology, which is largely about endangered species, and they're endangered because of our activities. And so there's a sense of who am I as a human being in a world that has been modified so much by our activities. What are we going to do going forward? And can we actually really grapple with that fact? So it doesn't influence me more and more. I think the compositions I'm doing now are more about trying to express in some way, but not necessarily sadly. It's more an expression of human desire to be integrated with the world again.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Jared, I think with that we can take it away for Caribou Crossing.
Yeah, so I was going to ask which piece you want me to go over first, Glenn, but
either one is fine. I guess we could, since I have mentioned it, Caribou Crossing, and I'll just explain the title. I work a lot with caribou. I have done for almost 10 years now. Woodland caribou in Canada are declining, and there's one of the measures that is used to manage landscapes that have caribou in them is to come up with a threshold of disturbance, amount of human disturbance that those landscapes can have, so that caribou populations don't decline any further. And most of our landscapes in which caribou live are actually below that threshold. So the word crossing has to do with that, crossing a threshold into a place where we're moving ecosystems of which caribou are part into a place that we can't they won't come back, if they come back at all, into the same shape. It's unsustainable. Yeah. So that's the meaning of that term.
Okay. So let me share the PDF, and I have some questions for you before we get started. Share. Okay, so this is a song, correct, for mezzo-soprano and clarinet, glockenspiel, and vibraphone. I'm wondering, what text did you base this on? I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but just
the words, yeah, and I'm sorry for there's lack of information at the top there, like text by and music by. Text is actually by me.
Okay.
So it didn't really start out that way. It started out actually as a series of tweets and newspaper articles coming from the 2018. So this piece has been on the deck for a while. North American Caribou Conference, which I couldn't attend, but I was following it on online. And it wasn't because of COVID; it's just I couldn't attend it. It was in Ottawa, and there was a series of tweets that came out, largely from First Nations, which I was thrilled at, and that was talking about we're all talking, but nothing is happening. We're not doing anything. And so I started writing text based on those tweets, and then gradually I realized, well, I'm appropriating other people's writing here. So I ended up writing my own words to it and simplifying it. This was going to be a much longer song, and now it's just very, very simple. Very, very simple.
Sure. Do you, just out of curiosity, have the text in like a written form that you can share with us right now? And it's okay if you don't.
Let me check as we go along through this. It has, like I say, there's been a bunch of drafts of it.
Okay.
So the text is, I mean, maybe I could probably almost recite it. All across the land, caribou are on course for loss, for extinction. What happens next? What happens next is a term from a newspaper article that was done during that conference that I just really liked, and it was really about that. And then the next one is we don't understand our connections between, and that's implying between humans, caribou, and the landscape. And then the very last verse is, who and what are we after they are gone? They are gone, what happens after that? So it's almost like a haiku. I mean, it's a little longer than that, but there's just three very, very short verses, and in the piece they're separated by a fair bit of music. So the verses it's not a song in the sense that it's a fairly continuous vocal line. There's vocal line with a lot of instrumentation breaks in it.
Interesting. Okay, that gives me a good sense of this, because I wanted to just sometimes when you're reading the text for the first time as a part of the music, it can be a little challenging to actually understand the text or to read the text as text. So this is very helpful now that you've told me that. Okay, I think now would be a good time for us to listen to this. And this is, you have some more text to set here, is that correct?
Yeah, at the very end. So this is a work in progress.
Got it. Okay, great. So I'm going to press play now, and we can take a listen.
And
Okay, great. A lot of really nice stuff here, Glenn. I particularly like the variety that you have in your harmonic language. Initially you start off with this sort of more thorny language, but the way you sort of arrive on this more tonal idiom right before the singer first comes in is really beautiful and really well done. So congratulations on that. I also feel like you have a very nice sense of space in your writing. It often happens that composers don't really have that type of space built into their writing. When I say space, I'm talking about sort of ebb and flow of motion. Sometimes composers will be just a little overly persistent about their motion, where they don't have enough breaks, they don't have enough breathing room. Not literal breathing room, I'm talking about more hearing breathing room, where you can sort of absorb each idea. But you actually have a really nice sense of that in here. So well done on that too. So I'm going to ask you the same question I actually asked Brittany, which was to describe the form and structure of what you're doing here, or what you want to do.
Yeah, I knew you'd ask me that question. Yeah, Brittany, it's a great question. And this has been one of the more, this piece is taking me a long time to write, for maybe some of the same reasons that Brittany described. In that I've been going after a vision, if you want, a sound, an idea that the music itself articulates. So I've had a really hard time writing it down, what it is I want. So the form has emerged, and you saw even in there the term as if materializing out of mist. That so, but I will describe a little bit. So the choice of instruments. So the voice is the human, especially, and really it's about us as settler people. Sort of the viewpoint of our culture and society as we industrialize our landscapes. The vibraphone is, in a sense, the earth, and the clarinet is the caribou. And it could also be played on the taragato, which is the Hungarian clarinet, which has a slightly it's less it's more wild, it's wilder sound than this. So I'm trying to keep it in the range so you could play it on either instrument, and has a bit more of a slightly thorny. I like your word thorny. It's a slightly rougher sound. So there's this sense that I want to get in the piece. I use my hands to gesture it because it's the most emotion in it is in, or that's what I'm trying to capture it in terms of relatable human emotion, is in the voice, because it's sort of a anguish in it, and maybe despair and uncertainty. The other voices, they're engaged in it, but they're not necessarily sad. If you want to, like the earth will recover from what we do. 1,000 years from now, 100 years from now, in some way, but it will be different than what it is now. And for for different life forms, that may be a problem or it may not be. So the form has been trying to express all that and weave it together, and it's been a weaving together, and so these ideas have kind of come into my mind, if you will, and almost as a surprise. So the thorny bit was how I started. This piece actually started at the first note, and it's kind of progressed to the end. And I haven't thought too far ahead, because I don't know. This piece has been speaking to me, and it's sort of telling me what to do. I do go back to it and move things around. I don't know if this is answering your question, but the tonal part is like it did shift into a tonal world, and then it shifts out of it and shifts back into it. So there's this shape shifting aspect. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I get that sense, and it's helpful for me to sort of understand your thinking in terms of the role of each instrument. What I wonder about, though, like it's good to know the role of each instrument and things like that, but I just wonder if you were to draw the shape of this piece on like a graph, to use a kind of crass comparison, I guess, like the stock market, that's like a line graph or something, or maybe an apt comparison considering industrialization is so tied to capitalism. But anyway, if you were to draw that on a graph, where would be sort of the point of highest intensity, and where would the point of lowest intensity be? Like, where do you want that, or is there a point of high intensity and low intensity?
Well, there is somewhat here. There's the piece, in my mind, fairly early on reaches a fair bit of intensity, as it's in the second or third page, the vibraphone and this section in here and the clarinet kind of working to describe the thorny. I like that tension. Then the tension seeps out a little bit, and then it builds up again as you get to the word extinction.
Where's the word extinction? Sorry.
It comes quite a bit later. All across the land, caribou are going for loss. Are
right here, extinction.
Right for extinction.
Okay.
Where the vibraphone starts doing these sharp, chords, so percussive, sharp sounds.
Okay.
And then,
sorry, go on.
And then there's a sense of settling down a bit again, and then kind of more harmonically adventurous as this we didn't understand, we don't understand the connections. So the beginning of each verse, maybe there's a sense of building tension towards the last few words of the verse. Maybe that kind of captures it.
Okay, so I think what you need to, one thing that I think is helping you and proving very successful for you is writing sort of bit by bit, moment by moment, from beginning to end. That's how you're working, if I understand?
In this piece I am, yeah. It's not okay. Not every piece is like that. This is one piece I don't have a deadline for, so it allows me to work this way, but other pieces I have less time.
I think it's great that you're working this way, and I think one positive result of that is this sort of sense of pacing that you have with it. It's very sort of almost improvisatory sounding, which is difficult to do when you're working with notated music. Mm-hmm. I do think, though, that taking a step back and sort of thinking more globally within the piece, of course, not like actual globally, but thinking more globally, just again, where these moments of highest intensity are, and then trying to think very technically, by which I mean notes, rhythms, instrumentation, timbre, texture, range, every possible musical parameter. Think about all of those things and how you are using those things in the music to create these moments of intensity. And compare it to other moments and see, like, I think what can really create intensity is if you either fulfill an expectation that you're expecting for the audience. So, you build up big crescendo to a big climactic point, and then you hit that climactic point and you fulfill that expectation. Or maybe you build up a big climactic point and you're about to hit that climax, but then everything drops down and it's suddenly very soft. I mean, you either subvert tension, or you either subvert an audience's expectations, or you fulfill their expectations. But I think, like, these intense moments, if you can identify truly what's creating them musically on a technical level, and then expand them so they become greater points of arrival, and then make sure that whatever aspects are creating these moments of intensity, you're not doing them in quite the same way beforehand, then I think that you can make them sort of stand out as moments of great intensity. And vice versa for moments of lower intensity. If you figure out what's creating the lowest amount of intensity in this music, and then avoid that particular way of presenting the ideas beforehand, then you can create those moments of low intensity. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah.
And it might be that, like, you know, you have an intense moment like the one you described on the third page, which was very exciting and sort of getting cooking. But I feel like you didn't actually draw that idea out as much as you could have. I feel like it could have actually developed for much longer and been much more linear, rather than just sort of coming to a stop.
Okay.
And, you know, maybe that's not even the most intense moment. So, like, yeah, I think just trying to assess what your highest points of intensity in this piece are, on a technical level, and then doing everything you can to enhance those moments of intensity with different musical techniques. And I don't mean extended techniques. I mean literally like forte, range, etc. I think that'll help you just have more of a definitive shape, and also, you know, help you figure out where you're going with, you know, the part that you haven't written yet. Because if you sort of take that part and compare it and say, okay, do I want this to be of the highest intensity or of the lowest intensity or somewhere in between? And you know that these musical qualities create high intensity and these musical qualities create low intensity, then you can start to figure out what exactly that needs. And it may involve some readjusting to stuff you've already written, which is okay, right?
Yeah.
And then in a similar way, it's great that you're, you know, thinking so representationally about the role of each instrument in this configuration, and the sort of extra musical role that they have. But I wonder if you've asked yourself on a deep level, what technical aspects of the music are conveying these extra musical ideas that you have in your mind? So for instance, what technical aspects of the vibraphone part are creating the earth, and how does that music you sort of compare to the caribou, which compares to the voice? I mean, you talked a little bit about how harmonically the voice is sort of tonal in this tonal world. So, I mean, that's a really effective mechanism. And I sensed that when the voice came in, you really were conveying the human emotion with the voice and with the introduction of tonality. So I wonder if you can also think about the vibraphone and clarinet in the same way, not just with regards to tonality, but with regards to how you're using the instruments, the motives they play, all of these sorts of things. Does that make sense? Oh.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, it, in a sense, trying to keep them, what's the word I'm looking for there? They have things to contribute, which I think is what you're saying. So think really carefully about the technical pieces of what they're contributing to this whole. I'm trying to represent a social ecosystem put it that way. Yeah. And so I want there to be individuality, but also that they work together. And I think you're really pushing me to think hard about how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you already are doing it. I'm talking more just how you can sort of evoke how using the different characteristics of these instruments, you can evoke the things that you're trying to evoke and represent, as you're trying to represent. And sometimes, like, you know, I hate to be like the old school technique guy, but like sometimes it really is just being like, okay, these pitches represent this, and this instrumental technique represents this, and it's sort of working in that realm and sort of finding a balance between this more sort of extra musical representational thinking that you're going about,
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of using your knowledge and expertise as a composer, your technical expertise of music to sort of find a balance between those two aspects. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I also, I mean, it's a similar comment to what I gave to Brittany actually, but you have a lot of dialogue-like material here where you're, you know, each instrument kind of has its own role in what it's doing. And the roles are kind of independent from one another. But I think there's a lot of maybe potentially dramatic possibilities with what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
as well as coloristic and timbral and textural possibilities of what you're doing if you found a way to sort of blend the instruments at some moments as well and had them function as sort of a unit.
Yeah, that's true. That's not really here. Yeah, so that's a really good suggestion. I think that it may, yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, I think because like I don't know, clarinet and vibraphone are just the most beautiful combination. Like I love that personally. I love that combination. Especially if the vibraphone is using like soft mallets, because then you know the attack of the clarinet is very soft as well, and the attack of the vibraphone is very soft. So they can sound like the same thing basically, but then you could put a little bit of motor on the vibraphone, and then you get like this coloristic
Oh,
combo, which is
yeah,
really kind of magical.
yeah,
Or bowed vibraphone as well, plus the clarinet. Um,
yeah. I have bowing in here in a couple of places, but I don't make much use of it. And you didn't hear it on the, it didn't
no,
render.
but I noticed that.
Yeah.
Actually, what's the use of the glockenspiel in here? You have that in here, but you didn't explain. Does it have a narrative role as well?
Yes. Can I articulate it? Uh, color. It's part of. It sounds almost fatuous, so